I'll do that.
I cleared my hard disk. Now I'm confident now that, well, I hope so. And I hope it's going to record from now on.
Do you want me to press anything?
No, you
Just
don't have to do it.
continue. I've got a little box on my screen. Should I say continue?
Oh, you might have to press like it's okay. I don't mind.
Continue. Right, done. Done. Now, right, just recently, I was in a Doll's Hospital in Lisbon. Well, I've been in there a few times over the years, but I love going in this little tiny family-run business that's been there for about 200 and something years. And they have a little museum upstairs. So I went in before Christmas and said to the lady downstairs, Manuela, who I knew was the owner, but I didn't say I knew she was the owner. I just said, I'm an English artist, and could I do a little project about your museum? So she said, yeah. So you pay €3 to go in, and a girl of about 16, 17 took me up into this little museum. There's thousands of dolls. It's wonderful. It's just brilliant. So I said to her, would you mind maybe moving the odd doll off a shelf so I can take a picture, because I don't want to drop anything. So she said, yeah, fine. So after a little while, I said, do you work for the Doll's Hospital? She said, well, yes, I do. I said, but it's my grandma owns it.
Oh.
And she was just such a delightful girl. So I asked her if I could take a photograph. I said, would you not mind taking your mask off? Because in Portugal, we had to wear masks then.
Yeah.
So she said, yeah. So we took a few pictures. I didn't tell her what I was going to do with them, but I included her in a series of digital images all about the museum. And Manuela, the owner, I asked if she'd send me old photographs of the museum, which she did. But she didn't know I was going to include them in the digital series and her in them as well. So on my last visit to Lisbon, I arranged to meet her at the Doll's Hospital and walked in with a little tiny folder with 40 A5 digital collages all about the museum. And she just stood there and said, wow. I said, well, that's free. It's a gift. It's a present for you. I've enjoyed doing the project. I loved it. It's such a tiny place. So I think where I'm going with this comment is I'm more interested in odd, eccentric, alternative kind of venues these days.
Yeah.
And I kind of get more of a buzz from doing the Doll's Hospital thing than, perhaps a show in inverted commas in a gallery. So yeah, that's the kind of, I think, the direction I'm going in is kind of slightly unexpected venues that kind of throw me. I just love museums and love getting in storerooms.
Yeah, for me, that is the beauty of many venues and places, is the backstage, the behind the.
Exactly.
Yeah. Always loved them, and that's been a big part of my life too.
Yeah. So I've just completed another project in Portugal. The director of one museum had a small gallery in the museum that he kind of dedicated or had given to fine art students in the University of Faro, with the idea of them producing some work about the museum or the works in the museum. And they didn't, they just kept doing what they wanted to do. And he was getting a bit fed up with it, just keep coming with all this conceptual stuff or, things that would bugger all to do with the museum. So we were chatting one day, because I've known him for a long time. He said, Charlie, so would you do a project for the museum? I said, yeah. So I said, you can do what you like. So great. So he said, follow me to a storeroom. So we went into this kind of long stable block. I mean, it's seriously long. And I've always wondered what was upstairs. And he opened the door. It was just like, wow. It was just piled high with old bird cages, prams, olive jars. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And he said, off you go. And he said, just a minute, there's another storeroom. And this museum is noted for its antique costume. So we went into a new building with all these kind of sealed units with all the fabrics and dresses and things in them. And it was just like slide them out. I was just standing there thinking, wow. So I haven't finished this basement next. Went into the basement. It's all Dexian shelving, boxes, labelled, stamps, records, this, that and the other. So you can do what you like, pull all the boxes out. So he just left me in there for a week. And so I did a project about the museum, which is on now in the museum. But the other thing that I very often do with exhibitions now is I don't hang the work up. So 2 ladies that work at the museum, both Portuguese, I said to them, I want you to choose the work that goes on display. And I don't want to have any part of it. I just want you to put up things that you like. And they said, oh, I can't do that with your work. I said, yes, you can. I don't mind. Do it. You know, there were so many of them. I said, look, let's put maybe 20 up, maybe leave them for a month, and then take them down and put another 20 up. But you can decide what goes up and where it goes. I said, are you sure? I said, yeah, it's more fun for me. Because if I do it, I know I kind of will kind of, even though I try and do it by chance, that I'll kind of slightly organise it. You know, I can't think, well, I'll put a red one next to a green one or this one next to that one. I thought it'd be more fun if they did it. So they had fun doing it. I haven't even seen it yet. So I'll see that on my next visit.
That's a really nice idea. I'd like to do that more. How great. So, I mean, one of the worst things about exhibitions and stuff is all this arrangement, all this over presentation and all this over invigilation. And sometimes for me, I find the joy gets sucked out of it. So I think the way you're working keeps a lot of joy alive, because after all, you feel joy when you make the work and you really value that experience. So great. Keep that going all the way through, right to the end. That emotion, that interest.
Yeah, but what's really good fun, because I like fun. I mean, it's serious, but I'm serious, but I like fun.
Yeah.
I did a show at Stockport Art Gallery a while ago, and they gave me this huge room, which I collaged from floor to ceiling, because a friend of mine fly posts the entire northwest of England. So I've got unlimited access to huge posters. So I've got all this lot, completely covered the walls of the gallery, which took me sort of 2 or 3 days. Then all the work, which were probably 200 or 300 collages on canvas and various other bits of stuff. So I invited a couple of friends of mine to come and help me hang it. So they walked in and said, right, let's put the work up. Here's a screwdriver or whatever. And they said, well, where? So, well, here's a piece of work, there's a wall. Pick one up and put it on the wall. So I said, yeah, put them where you like. I don't care where you put them. I'm not really bothered whether they go up the right way. I'm not bothered. Just let's have fun. So we did all this for 2 or 3 days. And then come the opening on a particular Saturday morning, I'm kind of walking around because I'd left them to it. I kind of walked around. I looked up on the wall and I thought, one of them had put a collage that had a head and body on it, on the legs on a poster. So the poster legs looked as though they were part of the legs of a collage. So I kind of carried on looking around. And another collage that had an eye on it, he put over an eye on a poster. And as I went around, I found more and more of them. He'd been playing games with all the work, looking for places he could, put them to cause a bit of kind of. Yeah, I didn't even know he'd done it. But I mean, like he's a Scouser, Jack the lad, wit. I should have realised what he was up to, but it didn't matter because we had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, that sounds. I really like that. I wish more hanging was fun, because often hanging is people with plumb lines going around trying to make sure everything's in a big straight line. And I feel, oh,
Yes.
if I wanted to do design, I wouldn't be here now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I've kind of let myself off the hook with straight lines and spirit levels. I mean, there are some times when I do an exhibition where I do have to get it right, and in that kind of way,
Yeah.
and I will do it. But for the most part, I like to try and not try, but I like to include other people in it, so that they've kind of they've got a bit of ownership of it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And I don't know where that kind of started, but I remember, you've heard of Joana Vasconcelos, Portuguese artist, makes things in plastic, and she has a huge studio by the Auric Museum in Lisbon and employs about 40 or 50 people. And she has a team that make lace things, and they cover grand pianos, and it's just mind-boggling stuff she does. And she did an exhibition in Lule, in the city gallery where we live, and she spent 3 or 4 days in the museum with a huge piece that she got that was a giant octopus, fabric octopus, and local ladies were in there sewing things on it. And Joanne had been down to the local seaside town, Quatera, and bought plastic lobsters and crabs and all sorts of daft things. She'd come back with carrier bags of stuff. And they were all sitting on the floor in the gallery, sewing these things on it, so that as it was in Lule, it was added to from Lule. When the piece went wherever it went next, she would get another team of people to add more things to it. And it's just such a nice idea, because then people have got this kind of ownership of it. It's not the great artist comes in and does it and disappears. Yeah,
So nice. There's too much in this world that is behave, do what you're told as best as possible, follow the rules, and then it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I love collaboration as well. I mean, I work not with everybody, because collaboration, when you're working with someone like that, you've got to be a bit more selective who you work with, because not a lot of people like collaboration. They don't work.
No, and I think also you've also got to be able to let go. You've not got to be too precious.
Yeah.
Because you could spend time. I did a project with an English guy. We did about 400 collages that went backwards and forwards in the postal system all over the world. So we'd shown those in England, Portugal, the States, Russia, all sorts of places. But you just had to accept the fact that I might have done some ace thing on a collage, and it came back blast. It's a gone. Well, tough. It's gone.
Yeah.
Because then you'd add to it, so it becomes a history of the piece, and it doesn't really matter, because both our thumbprints was equally important. My thumbprint wasn't more important than his. It was just like a shared effort. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. Well, with something like that, yeah, it's great if people aren't too precious, because then it does allow you to be expressive, and you can, you don't have to think somebody's going to veto the things or send it back with comments, which
no.
Good. I mean, comments are good, but the kind of you need a certain mentality to really get in the spirit of encouraging the whole vibe to stir the pot nicely.
Yeah. Well, I did another little project in a communist reading room in Kochi, because Kerala is a communist state. It's also incredibly literate state. And there's this all over India. There's not as many as there used to be, but there are reading rooms where newspapers would be put in there daily, and men go in and sit and read the newspapers. And this particular one, I really loved it. And the first time I saw it and went in it, I just wanted to do something in it. I don't know what, but I wanted to do something. So I started to go in this newsroom every day for an hour and talking to the guys that were in there. And once I'd gained a little bit of confidence with them, and I was there on a regular basis for some time, not just in and out and gone, I asked them if I could take photographs of them reading newspapers. and told them that I was, I was going to put a little exhibition on, sometime later, which I did. 2 years later, I went back and put all these little tiny prints in the reading room on the wall of them reading their newspapers. And then when the show finished, I gave them all the piece of work that was on the wall that was of them reading the newspapers. And it was just such a nice little project to do, because I got to know so many people in the town by just sitting in a room with no women. And this kind of is, kind of part of what, Kavitha's trying to do now in Kerala with her, women's poetry page and the common women's collective, etc. It's still very much a male orientated, society. You would never see a woman walk into that reading room.
Even though it's a communist society, it hasn't taken on that aspect of the.
No, it hasn't. Because I remember when I first met Kazur and we went to his house for a meal, his wife, who got a degree in English literature and taught Shakespeare and whatever, and she was in the kitchen cooking, and all the men sitting about waiting for it. And I was chatting to her after and said, "Look at me, MA, BA, doctorate, I'm stuck in the bloody kitchen. What's happened? I've done all this, and here I am back in the kitchen, back in her society."
Yeah, and probably she's unusual as well for having a lot of freedom that she's had to take.
That she's had
as high as she has, and even so, it only goes so far.
Yeah. I mean, when I, talk, because I know Kavitha well, personally, as well as reading what she does. She's very much in a male-orientated middle-class world. The head of the Biennale, Bose, man, second, man. The conferences that she goes to and delivers papers, men. And so she's kind of, obviously, kind of very aware of that. So I think the next projects that she's working on will probably, to be another year or two, work in them. From the Poetry Collective and the Women's Art Collective. And she organised a one-day conference.
You're really dependent on the significant men in your life, particularly if you're married to your husband's kind of goodwill. If you don't have that, then it would be impossible, I suspect.
Yeah. But it was pretty, I mean, just going back to visiting her in Thrissur, and she took time off the university so she could take us to different places. I mean, as you know, if you've got access to somebody like that and you're going to meet people or going to visit somewhere, you get a little bit more below the skin of somewhere. You can never not be a tourist. You can never not be an estrangero, but you can get a little bit closer to kind of what's going on. And so that's another plus for me, meeting people is getting a bit closer to, what's going on.
Yeah, for me too, that's exactly how I've always been, wanting to not be a tourist, even though, as you say, you can't help but be a tourist. You're an outsider, let's say, perhaps not a tourist. I might not use that word so much because it implies wanting all that infrastructure, but you're always going to be an outsider. You're not going to be.
Yeah. And even though, you think I mean, I curated a big show in Lule for 15 years, which was part of a world music festival. And that again was just sheer bloody cheek on my part. I'd been to some little town on the west coast, and there were lots of paintings kind of screwed on the walls of buildings. I thought, what a great idea. And I went to this music festival I'm wandering about, and I'm looking at walls thinking, why can't we have paintings on walls at this festival? So I just found out who was one of the main shakers and movers of the festival and made an appointment to see them, and sat in this guy's office who